Understanding the true message of Hebrew Israelites, beyond the colloquial language. Free use, editorial use by Heritage Weekly. But first, a word from our sponsors. Jacob's Trouble, Birth of a King. The highly anticipated continuation of the Jacob's Trouble series is now available for pre-order on Amazon. Dive into apocalyptic judgment, the restoration of Zion, and the rise of the millennial kingdom. Christopher Turner masterfully explores scripture and prophecy, unveiling Yahweh's role in the destiny of the true Israelite nation. Pre-order your copy today on Amazon. The Freedom Articles, coming soon. The Freedom Articles is a powerful collection of essays exposing false doctrines, reclaiming Israelite heritage, and revealing the unbreakable truths of Scripture. Prepare for a transformative journey into Yahweh's covenantal promises, and their prophetic fulfillment. Stay tuned for the release date and updates at Heritage Weekly. Support these works and uncover the truth. Claim your copies today. Now back to our story. Understanding the true message of Hebrew Israelites, beyond the colloquial language. When Hebrew Israelites speak about judgment, slavery, and divine justice, their message is often misunderstood. Many outsiders interpret their statements through the lens of modern race relations, leading to accusations of hatred or racism. However, the message goes far deeper than skin color or racial divisions. The language used by Hebrew Israelites is not meant to perpetuate hate, but rather to explain complex biblical truths using colloquial terms that resonate with today's audience. This approach, while effective in some ways, can create confusion when it's not understood within its true context. The role of colloquial language. The Bible is an ancient text written in a context vastly different from our own. Hebrew Israelites often speak of prophecy using modern, accessible language, terms like white, black, or slave, to explain concepts that are much broader and more spiritual than contemporary race issues. However, these terms can be misleading if taken literally, as they don't align perfectly with the original context of the scriptures. When Hebrew Israelites speak of white people or black people, it's not about condemning a specific race based on skin color. Instead, they're using these terms to address the historical roles certain nations have played in the oppression of Israel. The Bible speaks of judgment coming upon the nations that enslaved and mistreated Israel, not because of their skin color, but because of their actions toward God's chosen people. The language used is an attempt to communicate a prophetic reality in a way that's familiar to modern listeners, but it's not about racial animosity. The prophecy of justice, not vengeance. The true message is about divine justice, and the restoration of Israel, not vengeance or racial supremacy. The Bible's prophecies speak of a time when those who have oppressed Israel will face judgment, not because of who they are ethnically, but because of how they've treated the covenant people of God. This is made clear in passages like Revelation 13:10 and Zechariah 14:2-3, where the nations that have oppressed Israel are held accountable for their actions. But the focus isn't on racial hatred, it's on God's justice. The oppression Israel has faced throughout history is not about a battle between racial groups, but a spiritual struggle between good and evil. Obedience and rebellion. It is about the nations acknowledging the Creator and His sovereign plan, which includes the restoration of Israel as a light to the world. This is why the prophecy of Israel's return and the coming judgment isn't about oppression, it's about justice and God's ultimate plan of redemption. The reality is more complex than the imagery. While the colloquial language used today may evoke images of racial conflict, the true reality will be much more nuanced. The reality of the prophetic fulfillment won't necessarily look like the simplistic images we might associate with slavery or domination in a modern sense. Instead, it will be about the spiritual alignment of the nations with God's divine will. Israel's role is not to oppress others, but to fulfill its place as God's chosen people, a people called to reflect His glory to the nations. As seen in Isaiah 63, the goal is for Israel to be a light to the world, showing the nations the true path to God. The judgment mentioned in the Bible is not about cruelty or domination, it's about restoring righteousness and re-establishing the rightful order, where all nations recognize the sovereignty of Yahweh Jesus as Lord, moving beyond modern racial constructs. One of the most significant hurdles in understanding this message is moving beyond the modern constructs of race and identity. The Bible does not categorize people the way modern society does. The emphasis is not on skin color, but on spiritual identity, obedience to God's commandments, and the role each nation plays in God's plan. It's essential to understand that when Hebrew Israelites use modern terms like white or black, they are speaking within a framework of prophecy and historical oppression, not adhering to the false race science developed by Europeans. The message isn't about one group rising above another based on skin color, but about the restoration of Israel, and the ultimate justice of God, that will touch all nations, requiring them to acknowledge His authority. Conclusion. A call for understanding. To truly understand the message of the Hebrew Israelites, we must look beyond the surface-level imagery, and embrace the deeper spiritual truths they are conveying. The Bible speaks of justice, restoration, and a time when all nations will bow to Yahweh as Lord. The language used today is an attempt to explain these profound concepts, but the reality is much more complex than what is often portrayed colloquially. By focusing on the larger picture of God's divine plan and the restoration of Israel, we can begin to see that the message isn't one of racial division, but of righteousness, judgment, and divine order. It is a call for all nations to recognize the sovereignty of God and the rightful place of Israel in His plan, not through oppression, but through restoration and justice. By Christopher Turner, Heritage Weekly founder and editor-in-chief. Expert theologist specializing in Israelite heritage and covenant theology. Biblical scholar and cultural historian focusing on ancient scriptures and the lost tribes of Israel. Author of Rediscovering Israel, a comprehensive study of covenantal promises and the scattered tribes. Author of Jacob's Trouble, The Birth of a King, an exploration of apocalyptic judgment and the restoration of Zion, and the Freedom Articles, exposing pagan lies, restoring Israel's hidden heritage, and reclaiming true scriptural power, an in-depth examination of scriptural truths and Israelite restoration. Contributor to theological journals, Insights on Hebrew Texts, Prophecy, and New Testament Context. Covenant theology researcher unveiling the promises made to Israel and their fulfillment.